My name is Brian Cushing. I'm the Executive Director at the Shelby County Kentucky Historical Society. And Shelby County is a place where people are interested in their history, they're invested in it. It's really been a great place to be. And so I never know who's going to walk through that door every day. It's a little bit of everybody. And today, Mr. Boyd Phillips came to join us. And so this is a conversation that I wanted to include everybody out there on. So I'm just going to go ahead and let Mr. Phillips tell his story. What brought you here today?
Well, I wanted to tell the story of my family and how they were related to the Hatfield-McCoy feud. And I have a half great uncle and a half great aunt who were Hatfields. And so you're probably trying to figure out, why do I have Hatfields? But primarily my family is, I have a great-great-grandfather who was a McCoy and played a very important role in the feud itself.
So you're Hatfield and McCoy.
I'm McCoy, but I have a great uncle, the half great uncle, and I'll tell that story as to why they're uncles and aunts.
Gotcha.
In my family. What I'd like to do is start out but tell you where I grew up. My wife and I grew up in eastern Kentucky, up in the mountains, in the Hatfield-McCoy area. Matter of fact, she lived closer to the Tug River than I did. I was about 8 miles away. I was raised up at the head of Pond Creek in a small coal mining community called Number 7. It was so small that he gave it a number instead of a name. Huh. And the nearest post offices were McVeigh and Pinson Fork. And that's where I grew up, went to school, and met my lovely bride. And we've been married 57 years now.
Congratulations. We
came here to Shelby County 50 years ago. Our children went to school here and grew up. And what I want to do is share some of the things, the memories I have. And most of the memories I have came from my grandfather. My grandfather was Jesse James Phillips. And Jesse James, and I have a photo here somewhere of him. And I used to go squirrel hunting with him at all times. I'm going to share one of these with you. Okay. And I have one. He lived to be 94 years old. And Jesse was the son of Nancy McCoy and Frank Phillips. And what I have, as I said, is the story behind this marriage that occurred. I'm going to go back and start now with the feud itself and some of the major things. This is a picture of the very first victim of the feud itself. And his name is Asa Harmon McCoy. And he was living there with a family. And about 2 years after the Civil War began, he decided that he was going to fight for the Union Army. And he went to the end of the war, fighting for the Union, where everybody around him, Devil Anse Hatfield fought, which was the leader of the Hatfields at this time, fought for the South, and a brother of Asa Harmon McCoy, Randall, was the leader of the McCoys during the feud. He fought for the South, and he was not happy with his brother going away and fighting. Huh. But one of the things I'd like to tell you about is this story, first of all, right here. He is the first victim, I consider the first victim of the feud. And he had a broken leg during the war, and he was sent home to recover. Most of the early injuries that occurred in wounded people, if they lived close by, they were sent home to recover rather than in a field hospital. Right. And so he was sent home. Well, there was a home guard unit of the Confederacy in Logan County, West Virginia, and it was called the Logan County Wildcats. And they sent word to Asa Harmon here, my great-great-grandfather, we're coming after you. And so he went into hiding. and he hid in a cave up on the mountainside near his house. And so family members were bringing him food, bringing him meals and things like that, water and so on. And then on one night in January the 7th, 1864, they sent word that it snowed. And so as the person who was bringing the food, old Pete, when Pete brought him food, they just simply tracked him in the snow.
Oh.
Right to the cave.
Yeah.
And they shot him. Shot him and killed him. And of course, Randall, and this is Randall here, he was not too happy with his brother being shot. And the stories that I have come from my grandfather, Jesse James Phillips, right here. Mm-hmm. And
that's this one.
Yeah. Okay. Now, as the feud occurred, there were several things that are going to occur as a result of it. I sort of wrote a few notes down to make sure that I could stay on track. I'm an old retired history teacher. I'm 78. And as I said, the Civil War was the very first event that occurred that brought about the actual feud itself. And of course, most of the people, as I said, were pro-slavery and pro-South. And the leader of the Hatfield, the Logan County Wildcats, was a fellow by the name of Bad Jim Vance. And Jim Vance was an uncle to Devil Anse Hatfield. And he fought with the Home Guard unit to protect from Union soldiers. And as they went on, the term Bad Jim Vance he fit him to a T. Mm. And so his first victim was shooting Asa Harmon, my great-great-grandfather. Now, Asa Harmon's daughter was Nancy McCoy. And this is a picture of Nancy McCoy. And so she lost her father in the Civil War, as when her dad was shot by the Logan County Wildcats. And this is looks like, I don't know, I'd call it a tintype or anything, but it's...
I've never seen a photograph quite like that.
Yeah, this was handed down to me by family.
Wow.
And my grandfather, Jesse James, you can see there, he loved to squirrel hunt. Uh-huh. And I used to go squirrel hunting with him on our mountain. We had about 120 acres of mountainside, very little flat land.
Right.
Unless if you're used to the mountains, you can come up and it'd be a flat area.
Gotcha.
But it'd be way back on the mountains. So anyway, she was not too happy with her dad being killed and so on. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about would be some of the reasons why there was a dispute over land. And the dispute between the Hatfields, claiming about 5,000 acres of land in Kentucky, and the McCoys claiming the land. And so the 5,000 acres, when it went to court, the jury, which was wrote a pro-Hatfield in their return, mm-hmm. gave the land, which actually was belonged to the McCoys, gave it to the Hatfields. And that did not help matters either. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is everybody probably have heard things about what caused the feud. Other than the fact that, as I said, my great-great-grandfather being killed, what caused the feud? And it can go back to several things. And one of the first things was in which actual shooting and carrying on occurred was in those days the people liked to turn their hogs loose to just roam the woods, and so that they would not get lost and people would not know what. Try not to sort of steal them themselves, mm-hmm. and take them home with it. They would take their knives and cut notches on their ears, a particular notch on their ears, so this was mine. It's just
Right.
like a brand on a cow.
Yeah.
This would be a notch on the ears, and they'd turn it loose. And as Randall McCoy, my great uncle, great uncle, was walking by a farm one day, he noticed one of the pigs in a farm. He said, "That's my pig," and they had several of his pigs there.
Gotcha.
So they took it to trial, and the famous hog trial was one of the things that occurred. It went to trial. There were 6 Hatfields on the court, 6 McCoys on the jury.
Huh.
And so you can imagine this is going to be a hung jury.
Yeah.
And a fellow by the name of Bill Scott was a witness for the Hatfields. And he swore up and down that hog belonged to Randall McCoy, or Devil Anse Hatfield. And so this was one of the first events. And of course, when the jury voted, one of the Hatfields switched his votes and voted, and one of the McCoys voted with Hatfield.
Oh, wow.
And so that was one of the first things that occurred, the pig trial. And Bill Staton, Bill Scott, I should say, was later found out in the woods where he had been shot by Randall McCoy's 2 of his sons. And of course, when they were brought to jury and judge, there was no evidence to prove that they actually murdered him.
Right.
But he was found dead. Everybody knew who actually shot him.
Yeah.
And I want to go back and share with you, the Hatfields lived in West Virginia, separated by this small river called the Tug River. And it borders right along the Kentucky and West Virginia, and in southeastern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. From this point, the pig trial went on and on, but people sort of got over it after a while. The next event I'd like to talk to you about would be the romance of the mountains. And Devil Anse Hatfield had a young son, the youngest son that he had, and his name was John C. Hatfield. Johnson, and everybody called him John C. John C. Hatfield. Now, John C. was a romantic person. And when my records looked at on John C., he was a romantic guy. He was messed around with women a lot. He liked the romance. So, and I had the tape here, and one of the songs on here was John C. and Roseanne. And Roseanne was a daughter of Randall McCoy. And so one day at the election of 1882, yeah, you can take that, yeah.
Just show that for folks to see.
Yeah. This is called The Great Vendetta, and it was written and sung by Jimmy Wolford, a cousin of the McCoys and a cousin of mine.
Neat.
Yeah, and it is a wonderful tape too. So it tells the whole story. And but anyway, the Roseanne sort of had a romance with John C. Hatfield. And to tell you a little bit about John C., when I looked up some information on John C., he was married. He was never married to Roseanne, because when her father found out that she was dating John C., he disowned her.
Oh.
And so he said, I don't want anything to do with you. So she went and tried to live with Devil Anse Hatfield in his home. And and of course, Devil Anse would never allow him to get married.
Gotcha.
So, but she did have a child, and baby Elizabeth. And she left the Hatfield home and went to stay with an aunt. And there the baby died after about 6 months. And then Roseanne, as a result of being so demoralized by what was going on, the fussing and the shooting, maybe in the woods and so on, between the Hatfields and the McCoys. Her father, as I said, was Randall McCoy. And he is going to lose 7 children to the feud.
Oh, wow.
And a wife who was beaten almost to death.
Oh.
And I'll tell you that story. Yeah. This is Devil Anse Hatfield. And his real name is Anderson, but everybody called him Ance. And why they called him Devil? During the Civil War, he was fighting for the South, and he was a sharpshooter. He was an excellent shooter. And he was shooting against the Union Army from an area called the Devil's Backbone. And so this is where they hung the title on him, Devil Anse.
Okay.
But now, I have heard, as I said, this is one of the stories behind how he got his name. I want to talk to you, as I said, about the election of 1882. And the McCoys, as I said, lived in Blackberry Creek. The Hatfields would come across trying to sort of interfere in the election. Mm-hmm. And of course, there were Hatfields that lived in Kentucky too. And there were McCoys that lived across in West Virginia. One of the brother of Ellison Hatfield, who was the leader, was the brother of Devil Anse Hatfield, came to the election, and he was causing all kinds of problems. And as 3 McCoy boys walked by to go vote, they heard them laughing, and they wanted to wonder why he's laughing. Is he laughing at us? Hatfield was laughing against the McCoys. So they went up to him and quizzed him as to why he's laughing. And the 3 McCoy boys, one of them stabbed Ellison Hatfield in the chest with a knife. Oh. And then the other 2 joined in. And they began to stab and punch him until he laid on the floor. He was still alive, but he was just barely. Well, the word got back to Devil Anse Hatfield that his brother had been stabbed by the Hatfields. And so he went looking with the group for these 3 boys, and he captured them.
Wow.
And he took them over across the river into West Virginia and went to an aunt's house, and he told them, if my brother dies tonight, you will die. And sure enough, Ellison died. And the 3 boys, Randall Jr., who was only 16 at the time, I think the oldest one was like 28. Randall Jr., Framer, who was about 18, and then Tomer. And those were the 3 boys. They took them back across the river and tied them to pawpaw trees. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar with what a pawpaw tree is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. Anyway, tied them up to pawpaw trees and shot them. And that probably was the very first thing that caused the feud to really escalate.
Okay.
And it really, because now you had 3 of Randall's children have been killed, mm-hmm. murdered, according to him. And well, who wouldn't? After the murder of the 3 McCoy boys, the tension really grew. And you did not walk along or walk through the woods if you were a Hatfield or a McCoy. Someone was possibly shooting at you, and at all times. And by this time, the governor of Kentucky had to come out and say, I can't understand why the McCoys and the Hatfields are shooting each other. Mm-hmm. So he sent my great-grandfather, and this is a picture of him right here.
Here we go.
This is a picture that hung in my grandfather, Jesse James's house. This is his dad. And this is Frank Phillips. And Frank Phillips, one of the songs that was sung about him is he was able to shoot the eyeball off a flea with his pistol. So it's a fun song. So, but anyway, this is a song. This is a picture that's been hanging in my house for years, and because it was handed down to me, essentially the oldest one. William Billy here got together a posse and went looking for Hatfields. and he was able to arrest like 8 Hatfields, and then eventually would take them to prison, or take them to Pikeville, back across the mountains into in Pike County, Kentucky, and where they were put on trial and found guilty of murder, and they were sentenced to jail. Now, the leader, some say the leader of this group that shot the McCoy boys was Bad Jim Vance, and Bad Jim was bad, and he is considered the one who shot Asa Harmon, Nancy's my great-great-grandfather, when he was in the cave. He is given the heads up as one who shot him, and so he is also the one who escaped capture at this particular time. And the McCoy boys, or the Hatfield boys, were sent off to prison. Some of them were, and but this is not the end of it. Nancy McCoy is going to marry. This is the one that she's going to marry. John C. Hatfield.
Okay.
This is John C. right here.
Yeah.
And Nancy McCoy is going, and this is the one with the old Tim picture there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And and he is the one that had the affair with her cousin Roseanne. Now he has married Nancy McCoy. So McCoy and a Hatfield are getting married. They had 2 children by this marriage. The marriage didn't last real long, and one of them was this one here, Ancy Hatfield, and this is their child. And Ancy here was in the Navy and died in Egypt, and he was buried there for quite a while until finally his grave was brought back to Kentucky.
When did he die?
He died in 1917.
1970. So is that part of World War I?
World War I. He was in the Navy, and he was fighting there in the Mediterranean, and so he was brought back. His body was brought back. He had a daughter. They had a daughter also named Stella, and she didn't live to be very long. She was about 16 when she died.
Gotcha.
And so, but anyway, I don't have a photo of them. I have searched everywhere for photos and through DNA and so on and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm really fond of the DNA. Asa Harmon McCoy died. His family, of course, they were distraught and so on. He had a son named Lark, and he had a son named Jeff. Now Jeff is a great uncle of mine. He was a sister to Nancy McCoy, the ones in the picture, the frame there. And the Hatfields, the Hatfield 2 Hatfields came one day over to Kentucky, and they went after a couple of women and whipped them with cow's tails.
Oh.
Because they felt like these 2 women, they were Hatfield, McCoys, had been gossiping, telling stories about the Hatfields. And so they came across and went after them, whipped them, as I said, with cow's tails.
Wow.
And so Jeff here said, I'm not going to let them get away with that. So he went across the river and went to one of the Hatfields' home place, and there was the wife. So he went after her, fussing at her. He didn't hit her or anything.
Yeah. He
just went after him. And then the word got back, and so they went after, the Hatfields came across the river and found old Jeff. And Jeff, they took him to Pikeville and actually had a trial in Kentucky, and he was found guilty. And when he was released for a short while, and that's when the Hatfields came after and says, we can't let him be released. So they went after him and caught him on the banks of the Tug River. and they had a sheriff's deputy that was with him there to take him back and put him in jail.
Right.
And so Jeff jumped in the river to swim across the river back to Kentucky, and he was shot in the river. Mm-hmm. So my great-grandmother there, Nancy McCoy, her brother was now shot and killed. She's lost her father, and she's lost a younger brother,
wow,
Jeff. And so that, of course, and she is now, after this word is out, it gets out, Nancy, of course, who is now married to John C. Hatfield, she marries him. They have the affair, and they have the two children. She leaves him and goes back to Kentucky to stay with her family. And so Nancy now meets up with Bad Frank Phillips.
Okay.
Well, the term bad, well, he was bad.
It was true.
But I have a cousin, Betty Phillips, mm-hmm. who is one of the best researchers and in the whole state of Kentucky.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Hatfield-McCoy feud, she is super. She's wrote stories about them and so on, and she has spent almost all of her life trying to convince everybody that he was not bad.
Oh, but he was.
He was. He was. He was. And if you listen to the tape, mm-hmm. you will know
gotcha.
He was bad. The terminology was with Bad Frank and Nancy. The word comes out that Frank, of course, is on the loose. And so one of the things that I want to get across to everybody who is listening to this story, and I had a paper here that I can't find, but in it, I was just sort of Googling Bad Frank Phillips and Nancy, and in it, this was somebody had written down that Nancy was a daughter of Randall McCoy. Well, Randall was not her father, and Nancy's father was Asa Harmon McCoy, and the one who was first shot.
Okay.
And so and so I want to get across to everybody. Primary sources of information is the best thing to get, and so that. Now, let me tell you a little something about William Billy Phillips. This is Bad Frank's father, and he was a member of the 39th Kentucky, or the 45th Kentucky Mounted Infantry, and he fought for the Union Army, and he was at Louisa in January when the temperature got down so cold that the Big Sandy River, I don't know if you've ever been to Ashland.
I don't think I have.
Okay, yeah. Ashland is where the Tug River and Louisa there flows into the Big Sandy River.
Okay.
And then it flows eventually into the Ohio River.
Gotcha.
And he was on picket duty with about 6 other soldiers there on the Big Sandy River. Confederate troops walked across the frozen river, Big Sandy River, mm-hmm. captured him and about 5 other soldiers.
Gotcha.
Took them to Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah.
Now, in Richmond, probably the most notorious prison camp there at this particular time was Libby Prison. Libby Prison was the primary for officers. It was what you'd say for the established. You had to be an officer. Well, William Billy here was only a corporal.
Okay.
Or actually, he was a private. So he was sent to Belle Island Prison Camp in the James River there near Richmond, Virginia. And he was there for about a year or so, and he contracted smallpox, and he died. And he died there. And one of the things that I found out about him was I was up at the old Capitol building in Frankfort, and I was going through letters that had been written to the librarians mm-hmm. years ago. And one of the letters was a letter trying to get them to help them find where he is buried. and of course, he was buried in an unknown grave.
Right.
At this particular time, and so she was trying to get them to help him. So they were. I made a copy of the letter, and it was a cousin of mine who lived in Columbus, Ohio, and so that's where I got started with William Billy Phillips, and got him. Now this is a picture here of Asa Harmon McCoy's wife.
Okay.
And
oh wow.
That is one, and I've got the original of this photo right here.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Neat.
But it's a matter of trying to find it in my house.
Oh, gotcha.
And you'll see this photo, and of course, she was married to Asa Harmon,
mm-hmm.
and Asa Harmon, of course, showed you the picture of him there.
Right.
And his, and of course, this is a granddaughter, Goldie.
Okay.
Goldie. And this is a daughter of Nancy McCoy. This is a census record here from 1900. As I said, it was taken, and Nancy was living there. She was only 34 years old.
Okay.
And she's only going to live about one more year, and then she's going to die. She's going to die in 1901. Nancy does, the one with the
Right.
Living with her is Ancy. Estella, who was the other daughter between Bad Frank here and Nancy, was living with them too, and she was 14. Let's get back to the feud. Once the Hatfield boys were captured, and there were about 8 of them. They were not all Hatfield boys. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were just simply cousins.
Okay.
But they rounded up for Bad Frank and his posse rounded up about 8 or 9 of them. Took them to Pikeville. They were found guilty, put in prison. And even John C. Hatfield, who was married to Nancy first, and also had the affair with Roseanne, he spent 4 years in prison. One day, Frank was coming back home to be with his wife, Nancy here, and also with his rest of his family. And my grandfather, Jesse James, was only 6, and he tells this story to me and to all the grandchildren that would listen. He says, and of course, he said, one day they brought my grandfather home. He had been shot. Mm-hmm. Now, I have heard different variations of how he was shot. I've heard everything from he was ambushed. Mm-hmm. And probably the worst one I ever saw was one that he was, I almost want to laugh every time I hear it, was that he was on a book tour in a saloon where he was shot.
Oh, gosh.
Now that is one that hard to stretch. The one that I always heard was the fact that he was in the valley close to home, and he was ambushed from behind some old chimneys. And this is a story that was told me by my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And he said they brought my dad into the house, and they wouldn't let me stay in the house. They made me go outside. He had been shot in the leg and the hip. And so he said, so I had to go outside. So I watched them cut off my father's leg.
Oh, wow.
Through the window from the outside.
Uh-huh.
Now, he's only 6 years old
right.
at this time. And he said that made a big imprint on my life. And he said that this is one of the things that I remember mostly about this.
This is about 1906?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he said that I went outside, and when he died about 2 weeks later of gangrene, they took his leg, and after they cut it off, they had taken it around to the family cemetery. Mm-hmm. And the family cemetery, and they buried the leg. Huh. And then when he died 2 weeks later, they took him around, and you'll never guess what they did. They simply buried him over here away from his leg. They simply took a little outline and buried, and it's a concrete marker around, and that's where they buried the leg, right in it.
Huh.
And so on. Now, one of the things, being an old person, I forgot one of the major things of the feud. We got the hog trial. We got Johnson and Roseanne. We got Nancy and Johnsy Hatfield now are married. Election Day, 1882, when Devil Ance's brother Ellison dies. Then the three McCoy boys then are tied to the pawpaw trees. I've told you that.
Mm-hmm.
On January the 1st, 1888, Cap Hatfield and a bunch of them, this is January 1st, New Year's Day. Actually, it was in the New Year's Eve because it was dark at night. They decided they were going to cross the river with a gang, and they were going to attack where Randall McCoy and his family lived.
Okay.
And I got that out of order, so I didn't. But this is very important because in this particular night, they showed up, and of course Randall's in his cabin, and shots rang out from outside toward the house. And then the cabin is caught on fire. They set the house on fire. Bad Jim Vance is leading this group. They kill two of Randall's children here. They kill a son, Calvin, who is only about 18. Then they killed a daughter, Alifair. And one of the songs that you can listen to on the tape is about Alifair.
Okay. Is this all on the same night?
Yeah, all on the same night.
Okay.
They burn the cabin, and everybody. Of course, they have to leave the cabin, and there's fighting, and of course, Alifair and Framer are both killed. Now, and of course, the story goes is that Bad Jim Vance takes his rifle butt and bangs Randall's wife in the head. Bangs her until she never recovers from it.
Oh, wow.
Now he's without a house. He's lost his children. Eventually he's going to move to Pikeville. And you can still find the house where he lived.
Oh, really?
And he wound up being a ferry. He drove a ferry across the Big Sandy River.
Gotcha.
From one side of the river to the other for people who coming in. You have to know Pikeville to understand, because it's sort of strange, isn't it, right, as you grow up. But I wanted to make sure you got that in, because that probably was the last thing that occurred.
Okay.
Randall, of course, is now he has to leave, goes to Pikeville. He's lost his two children. He's lost his wife. His wife eventually dies as a result of this. And so he is also, as he is in Pikeville, he's living there by himself. He falls into the fireplace and is burned severely.
Okay.
And doesn't live much longer.
Right.
And that's where he dies. But the feud itself is, you can see the Hatfields and McCoys, and as a result of one of there were several of the McCoy boys and McCoys, or Hatfields, are going to be put on trial for the burning of the cabin and this. One of them, of course, is going to be Cotton Top Mounts. And Cotton Top was the son of Ellison Hatfield.
Okay.
Ellison is one who died at the election day.
Gotcha.
And so he takes his mother's name. Ellison was the only one that was charged and found guilty of this raid on the McCoy house and burning it down.
Right.
The killing of the two children, the beating up of the wife. And so Cotton Top is the only one that was arrested by Bad Frank and the posse and taken and put on trial. And Cotton Top was put on trial and found guilty, and he was hung. Now, Bad Frank, of course, is going to die in 1898 from his being shot. And so it's going to Cotton Top is going to be hung probably before that, because Frank, of course, is going to continue leading the posse, going after Hatfields and bring him to justice. And then, of course, once he is shot and brought home and he dies of gangrene, then he is over, and so on. But if you ever make it to Pike County, as I said, the Pike County tour, this is the 2 photos that I have here.
Right. So yeah, that's we've seen the originals of here today.
The originals.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the whole thing here, all along it. And we used to go to the cemetery of Bad Frank and Nancy, cleaned it off at least once a year. We'd go with my grandfather and help him. This particular book here is one of the best ones that I've ever had. McCoy's Their Story, The First Trouble. It's got the whole 9 yards, and it's got photos. And that's the end of the story.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for coming out here and sharing it with us today. Again, we're the Shelby County Historical Society in Kentucky. There's a Shelby County about everywhere. So if you want to,
Yes.
right, be sure to check us out at shelbykyhistory.org. You can also like us on Facebook and Instagram, and there is a great discussion group. And while you're on the website, maybe thinking about becoming a member, we let you choose your contribution level, and that is how we keep these doors open, and we get to keep doing great work like this, telling the stories, preserving the artifacts. So thank you very much, and we will catch you next time.